The ocean was quiet that night, so quiet that even the smallest ripple seemed to disappear into the darkness of the Pacific. A thin blanket of fog hovered over the water, hiding the horizon and turning the sea into an endless black void. Beneath that silent surface, an American submarine moved slowly through the depths, its engines barely whispering through the water. Inside the narrow steel hull, dim red lights filled the control room, and the crew worked in near silence. The smell of oil, metal, and stale air hung heavy as sailors watched their instruments and waited for orders. It was supposed to be a routine patrol mission: observe enemy movement, report back, and avoid unnecessary confrontation. But war rarely follows simple plans. Standing beside the periscope was the submarine's captain, a calm and experienced officer who had spent years learning the deadly patience of underwater warfare. His hand rested lightly on the metal handle of the periscope as he studied the silent sea above. Suddenly the quiet was broken by the sonar operator, who stiffened in his chair as a faint rhythm touched his headphones. At first it was distant, almost like an illusion carried through miles of water. But then it became clearer, the unmistakable beat of ship propellers cutting through the ocean. The young sailor leaned forward, adjusting the sonar dial, his heartbeat rising with every passing second. "Captain, I hear screws in the water," he said quietly. The captain turned immediately. "How many?" The sonar operator listened again, his brow tightening. One sound became two, then three, then several overlapping pulses of propellers echoing through the dark ocean. When he finally spoke again, his voice carried tension. "More than a few, sir. A lot more." The room suddenly felt smaller. Every man understood what that meant. The captain wasted no time. "Bring us to periscope depth." Deep inside the submarine, valves shifted and ballast tanks adjusted as the vessel slowly rose through the dark water, like a steel hunter approaching the surface. No one spoke as the submarine climbed. Every crew member understood that the next few moments could decide whether they survived the night. The periscope quietly pierced the surface of the sea, barely disturbing the fog above. The captain leaned forward and began turning it slowly. At first he saw nothing but darkness and waves rolling gently under the night sky. Then shapes began to form in the fog, large shapes, warships. His eyes narrowed as the silhouettes became clearer. One destroyer, then another moving through the darkness. Behind them were larger shadows, cargo transports moving steadily across the ocean, and even farther away were more ships, their outlines barely visible through the mist. The captain's grip tightened slightly on the periscope handle as he realized what he was looking at. This wasn't a small convoy. It was a massive naval movement, a fleet crossing the Pacific under the cover of night. Destroyers patrolled the outer edges, while transport ships moved safely in the middle. Counting quickly, he realized there were far more ships than expected. A dozen, maybe more. As he rotated the periscope further, a chilling truth settled into his mind. Ships surrounded them on nearly every side, north, south, east, and west. His submarine wasn't stalking the enemy. The enemy fleet had unknowingly surrounded him. One wrong movement, one glint of the periscope by a watchful sailor on a destroyer, and the ocean above them would explode with depth charges. A single destroyer could hunt a submarine for hours. Several destroyers working together could turn the sea into a deadly trap. The captain slowly lowered the periscope and stepped back, the control room watching him intense. Silence. The executive officer finally spoke, carefully choosing his words. "Sir, we should withdraw before they detect us." It was the logical decision. Any submarine commander facing such overwhelming odds would choose survival over attack. Against a fleet like that, engaging the enemy seemed almost suicidal. For a moment, the captain said nothing. Instead, he walked slowly to the navigation table where the enemy positions were being marked. Small pieces on the chart showed the movement of the ships above them. Something about the formation caught his attention immediately. The destroyers were not tightly packed. They were spread wide apart, leaving large gaps between their patrol patterns. The transport ships were moving steadily but without urgency. It was the formation of a fleet that believed it was safe. The enemy believed the ocean around them was empty, and that mistake could be catastrophic. The captain leaned closer to the chart as calculations formed in his mind: distances, angles, torpedo ranges, speed of the convoy. The executive officer watched him carefully, recognizing the dangerous focus in the captain's eyes. This was the look of a man considering an impossible attack. Finally, the captain spoke quietly. "If we leave now, they continue their mission." The officer nodded slowly. "Yes, sir." The captain tapped the chart where several ships were clustered together. "But if we stay, we could strike them where they least expect it." The room fell silent again. Every sailor understood the risk of what he was suggesting. Attacking a convoy, protected by multiple destroyers, meant that once the first torpedo struck, the entire fleet would begin hunting them. Depth charges would rain down into the water like underwater bombs. Many submarines have been crushed under that pressure, their steel hulls collapsing deep below the sea. Yet the opportunity above them was enormous. So many ships, moving slowly, completely unaware of the predator waiting beneath them. The captain looked around at his crew, seeing the tension in their faces but also the quiet determination of men who understood the stakes of war. Then he gave the order that would change the night forever. "Prepare torpedo tubes." The words echoed through the submarine, like a spark, igniting a fire. Sailors immediately moved into action, opening torpedo room doors and preparing the deadly weapons that rested inside the tubes. Each torpedo carried enough explosive power to tear a ship apart in seconds. The captain returned to the periscope and raised it again through the dark water. Slowly he began scanning the convoy once more, carefully selecting the first targets. If this attack worked, the enemy fleet would suffer a devastating blow. But if anything went wrong, if even one destroyer caught sight of them, the submarine and everyone inside it would vanish into the cold depths of the Pacific. Above them, the enemy ships continued moving calmly through the fog, unaware that beneath the waves a single submarine had just decided to fight an entire fleet alone. And within the next few hours, the ocean would erupt into one of the most dangerous submarine attacks of the war. Inside the submarine, the tension grew thicker with every passing second. The crew moved quickly, but quietly through the narrow corridors, preparing the torpedo tubes, while the captain remained fixed at the periscope. Outside, the massive enemy fleet continued moving slowly through the fog, completely unaware of the danger waiting beneath them. The captain studied each ship carefully as the periscope turned inch by inch. A destroyer cut across the front of the formation, its long shadow slicing through the water like a guard dog patrolling the convoy. Behind it were several transport ships moving heavily with cargo, their silhouettes large and slow against the night sky. Farther behind them were even more ships, stretching across the dark horizon. It was a tempting target, but also a deadly trap. One mistake and the destroyers would descend on the submarine like wolves. The torpedo officer's voice finally came from the forward compartment. "Torpedo tubes, 1 through 4 ready, sir." The captain nodded slightly, even though the officer could not see him. His eyes were still locked on the convoy through the periscope. He measured the speed of the lead transport ship and watched the rhythm of the destroyer patrol routes. The enemy escorts were strong, but they had grown careless. Their spacing left wide openings, where a silent submarine could slip a torpedo attack directly into the heart of the convoy. The captain lowered the periscope again and stepped to the plotting table. With calm precision, he traced the movement of the ships using a pencil, calculating the perfect attack angle. His officers leaned closer, watching the lines form on the chart. If they moved just slightly forward and fired at the right moment, the torpedoes could travel straight through the convoy path like spears thrown into a crowd. One hit could cripple a transport ship. 2 could break the convoy formation. But if several torpedoes struck different ships in quick succession, panic would spread across the entire fleet. The captain looked up. The head slow, maintained depth. The submarine moved gently through the dark water, closing the distance like a silent predator. Inside the control room, every sound seemed amplified. The faint hum of the electric motors, the quiet breathing of sailors waiting for the first shot. Minutes passed slowly. Finally, the captain returned to the periscope and raised it again. This time the convoy looked even larger. A massive cargo ship filled the center of his view, moving heavily through the waves with a destroyer escort crossing nearby. It was the perfect first target. Large, slow, and valuable. The captain's voice remained calm. "Set torpedo depth, 10 feet. In the torpedo room, sailors quickly adjusted the settings on the weapons. These steel cylinders were the submarine's only real power against the fleet above them. Each torpedo carried a warhead capable of ripping open a ship's hull like a knife through thin metal. The captain continued watching the convoy through the periscope. The destroyer escort drifted slightly away from the transport ship, as it followed its patrol route. A narrow window of opportunity opened for just a few seconds. That was all the captain needed. "Stand by, Tube 1. The torpedo officer placed his hand near the firing lever. The entire submarine seemed to hold its breath. The captain counted silently as the transport ship moved directly into the firing angle. The moment arrived. Fire. A sharp metallic sound echoed through the submarine as the first torpedo blasted out of the tube and shot into the dark water. The submarine rocked slightly as compressed air launched the weapon toward its target. Everyone waited. Seconds passed slowly. The torpedo raced through the ocean, leaving only a faint invisible trail behind it. The captain kept his eye on the periscope. The large transport ship continued moving forward, unaware of the steel projectile rushing toward its hull. Then suddenly the night above exploded. A massive flash of fire erupted along the side of the ship as the torpedo struck with devastating force. The explosion tore open the vessel's hull, and a tower of water and flame shot into the sky. Even through the periscope, the blast looked enormous. The submarine crew heard the distant boom echo through the water a moment later. The convoy instantly erupted into chaos. Alarms sounded across the fleet as sailors on every ship rushed to battle stations. Destroyers turned sharply, their engines roaring as they tried to locate the attacker. But before they could react fully, the captain gave his next order. "Tube 2, fire." Another torpedo shot from the submarine and sped toward a second transport ship farther inside the convoy. The crew waited again, counting the seconds in silence. Then another explosion shattered the night. The second ship erupted in flames as the torpedo detonated beneath its hull. Within less than a minute, two massive vessels were already crippled. Panic spread rapidly through the convoy. Destroyers raced in different directions, unsure where the attack had come from. Searchlights cut across the dark water while signal lamps flashed urgent warnings between ships. The captain knew the confusion would not last long. Soon the destroyers would begin dropping depth charges in wide patterns, hoping to catch the submarine beneath them. But the chaos above had created an even greater opportunity. The ships had turned and shifted positions in panic, accidentally clustering closer together. Through the periscope, the captain could see several large vessels crossing directly into the torpedo paths. A dangerous but brilliant possibility formed in his mind. If he fired quickly enough, multiple ships could be struck before the escorts realized what was happening. His voice remained steady.
"Tubes 3 and 4, prepare to fire."
The torpedo officer repeated the order as sailors rushed to load the remaining weapons. Above them, the convoy burned and scattered, but the submarine remained hidden beneath the waves like a ghost. The captain watched the moving targets carefully, aligning the periscope with the next ship sliding into range. Fire 3. Another torpedo raced through the water. Fire 4. A second weepo. Now, followed seconds later. Now, 4 torpedoes were racing through the ocean, toward different targets across the convoy. The captain kept watching through the periscope, his face illuminated by the faint red glow of the control room lights. Moments later, the night erupted again. A third explosion tore through the side of another ship, followed almost instantly by a fourth blast farther away across the convoy formation. Flames climbed into the sky as burning fuel spread across the water. Within minutes, the calm Pacific night had turned into a battlefield of fire, smoke, and screaming alarms. 4 ships had already been struck, and the enemy still had no idea exactly where the attack was coming from. But now the destroyers were beginning to organize. Their engines roared as they raced across the water searching for the hidden submarine. The hunt had begun. Beneath the surface, the captain slowly lowered the periscope and looked at his crew. The attack had only just started, and before the night ended, far more ships would be lost beneath the Pacific waves. The moment the fourth explosion shook the convoy, the ocean above the submarine descended into complete chaos. Flames burned across the surface where 2 transport ships had already begun to sink, their crews scrambling across tilted decks as black smoke climbed into the night sky. Alarms screamed from multiple vessels while searchlights cut through the fog in frantic circles. The calm formation that had once moved confidently across the Pacific had shattered into confusion and panic. Destroyers roared to life, their powerful engines pushing them through the water as they raced to hunt the unseen attacker. But beneath the surface, the submarine remained silent and hidden. Inside the control room, the crew waited for the next order, every man understanding that the most dangerous part of the battle had now begun. The captain hovered the periscope slowly, and studied the plotting table again. 4 torpedoes had already found their targets, but the convoy was still packed with ships, and in the confusion they had begun turning and clustering together in ways that created even more opportunities. The executive officer spoke quietly, the tension clear in his voice. "Sir, the destroyers will start dropping depth charges any second." The captain nodded calmly. He knew it was only a matter of time before the escorts began searching the water below them. Destroyers were built for this exact purpose, hunting submarines and crushing them beneath the sea with explosives powerful enough to shatter steel hulls. But panic was still spreading across the fleet above, and panic created mistakes. The captain made a quick decision. "Reload tubes 1 and 2, the order shot through the submarine like electricity. In the torpedo room, sailors immediately began hauling new torpedoes into position. Each one weighed thousands of pounds, and loading them inside a cramped submarine during battle required speed, precision, and complete focus. Sweat ran down their faces as they locked the weapons into the tubes. Meanwhile, the submarine itself remained motionless in the dark water, listening to the chaos above through sonar. The operator leaned over his headphones, tracking the destroyers as they raced across the ocean. "Multiple fast contacts moving toward the explosions," he reported. The captain nodded slightly. That was expected. The escorts were rushing to protect the damaged ships and locate the attacker. But the captain knew something they did not. The submarine had already moved slightly from its original firing position, drifting silently through the water. By the time the destroyers arrived where the first torpedoes had been launched, the submarine would already be somewhere else beneath the dark sea. After several tense minutes, the torpedo officer finally called from the forward compartment. "Tubes 1 and 2 reloaded, sir." The captain immediately raised a periscope again. Above the surface, the convoy looked completely different from just minutes earlier. Fires burned across the water where damaged ships struggled to stay afloat. Several vessels had stopped moving entirely while sailors rushed to control the flooding and flames. Other ships turned sharply, trying to escape the area. But this movement had created a new vulnerability. 2 large cargo ships had accidentally crossed into the same path while trying to avoid the burning wrecks. They were now traveling almost side by side. Perfect targets. The captain measured the distance carefully. The destroyers were still rushing toward the earlier explosion sites, leaving a small window before they realized another attack was coming. He spoke quietly, but firmly. "Stand by tubes 1 and 2. The torpedo officer placed his hand on the firing controls. Every man inside the submarine felt the weight of the moment. If they kept attacking, the destroyers would eventually close in. But each successful strike weakened the convoy further. The captain waited for the exact second when both ships aligned in the torpedo path. Then he gave the command, "Fire 1, fire 2. 2 more torpedoes blasted from the submarine and sped through the water like silent missiles. The crew waited again, counting the seconds. Above them, the convoy was still scrambling to understand the first attack when the new torpedoes arrived. The first explosion erupted beneath the hull of the nearest cargo ship, ripping open its side with a violent blast that lifted the vessel partially out of the water. Only seconds later, the second torpedo struck the ship traveling beside it. A massive flash of fire and steel tore across the ocean's surface as the ship's cargo ignited. The shock waves from both explosions echoed through the sea and into the submarine's hull. Now 6 ships had been hit. The convoy was in full panic. Destroyers began racing in wide circles, their sonar systems searching desperately for the submarine responsible for the destruction. Signal lights flashed urgently between ships while some captains tried to escape the area completely. But the confusion only made the situation worse. Ships crossed into each other's paths, slowing down or turning unpredictably, and every new movement created another possible target for the submarine hidden below them. The captain continued watching through the periscope, studying the battlefield he had created. Fires burned across the ocean like floating beacons in the night, illuminating terrified crews running across damaged decks. One transport ship was already sinking bow first, its stern rising slowly into the air. Another vessel had stopped completely as lifeboats were lowered into the water. Yet despite the chaos, the convoy was still enormous. Many ships remained untouched. The captain lowered the periscope again and looked at his officers. "We continue the attack." The words carried calm certainty, but everyone inside the submarine understood the risk. The destroyers would soon begin dropping depth charges across. the entire area. Once that started, surviving beneath the sea would become far more difficult, but the captain believed the opportunity was still too valuable to abandon. Each torpedo fired into the convoy weakened the enemy's ability to fight the war. Each sinking ship meant lost supplies, lost equipment, and lost momentum for the fleet crossing the Pacific. In the torpedo room, sailors were already preparing the next weapons. The submarine had more torpedoes ready, enough to continue the assault if the captain chose to risk it. Above them, the destroyers were finally beginning to organize their hunt, spreading outward to search the dark ocean below. The hunter was slowly becoming the hunted, but the captain was not finished yet. Through the periscope, he had already spotted the next group of targets forming in the chaos of the convoy, and before the night ended, far more ships would disappear beneath the waves.